Good evening. Welcome to Live United. Live United, where we have an opportunity to hear about how people are giving, volunteering, advocating, getting involved with the services here in the Monadnock region that make a difference in the lives of our citizens and are so critical each and every day to meeting the well-being needs of our youth, our adults, everybody who lives here. Today I'm fortunate to have with me Tony Ellsworth. Tony is with Rise for Baby and Family. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Thanks for being here. And Rise is an amazing program and very unique in some of the work that it does. It has a role in the community that I don't think anyone else is quite filling. So let's talk a little bit about Rise for Baby and Family.
So Rise has been around for 34 years, and our mission is to help infants and toddlers, young children, and their families. And the focus of our services is on the young child, but really children are part of families. And so in order for us to meet children's needs, we want to work with whole families. So Rise has two programs. Our largest program is our Early Supports and Services program. Some people know it by the term early intervention. And our smaller program is our child care program. And United Way specifically helps with our children who are eligible for early supports and services, and really does something that's very unique in the whole state, actually, where they help us provide a play group for children who need that service. So our Early Supports and Services program, we work with about 230 children annually, and a child is eligible if they have some kind of established condition or a delay in their development. So our children are very individual from one to another. Some have a little delay, some have a big and significant ongoing issue that they'll be dealing with their whole lives. Our families are equally as diverse. We have families who have good parenting skills, have health insurance, have transportation and a home, and we have families on the other end of the spectrum who are struggling with their basic needs. So what we do is very individualized, based on what that child's needs are, and based on what the family's strengths are and what the family's needs are. And we work just really closely together with the family for a positive outcome for their children.
So really a comprehensive initiative to support the family and child in
Absolutely.
Achieving success in life.
That's right.
And I want to focus in on the play group a little bit. Normally I wouldn't do that because I don't always just focus on the work that the United Way is helping to fund. But because this is a unique initiative here in the state of New Hampshire, I can't think of anywhere else that runs a play group like this. And probably a lot of people in the audience are saying, a play group? Why do you need a play group?
Yep.
So let's talk about, why do you need a play group?
Yeah. So oftentimes when people think about what young children learn, they think about colors, numbers, sizes, big and little, off and on, those kinds of things. And those things are really concepts that preschoolers have to learn. But when you think about it, there's so much learning that has to happen before those concepts can begin to emerge. And they are things like, how do I separate from my mom and have fun with other children? How do I communicate my feelings through words? How do I begin to play imaginary play? How do I get from one place to another? Mobility. How do I use my eyes and hands together to do fine motor tasks? How do I get along with other children? And those are the important things of early childhood. And so the best place to work on those kinds of things is in a playgroup setting. So when we work with all of our children, whether they live in any of the 34 towns in the region, we look at what's happening for that child during the day. So does the child already have an opportunity for socialization? Are they in child care? Are they in a play group in their community? Are they in a Mom and Me program? Are they in a gymnastics program? Are they in their church nursery where they're getting that kind of opportunity to socialize? For those children who don't have that opportunity, we've created an opportunity at Rise so they can come in. It is entirely through the United Way funding that we can do that. So we tend to have children, we always have children who don't have another opportunity, but we also tend to have children that for whom their needs are greater. and it might be more difficult for a child care or another place that isn't as used to children with special needs to be able to manage them. And the beauty of our play group is that they come in and join our children who are there for child care. So it's a group that includes children who are developing typically, for whom our children can learn from. And everybody comes in and they're not singled out one way or another. They're all included in the group, but we have a child to staff ratio that's great enough so that we can manage what those issues are. And the collaboration between our early supports and services staff and our child care staff is really critical. So our child care staff has many more skills at managing unusual issues than the typical child care would.
Now, share with us a story about how this might work for someone.
Yep. So I'm actually thinking about, I'm thinking about two different children, so I'm going to just make it one. So I'm thinking about a little girl who was developing typically until about 18 months. And around 18 months, her parents noticed that there were things that she stopped doing, that her play became more alone, that her words that she had seemed to drop off and not be there anymore. And she began doing some behaviors that were really worrisome. She would put a lot of inedible things in her mouth, and they had a trip to the emergency room to take pebbles out of her nose that got lodged in there. And so she was referred to Rise, and she was found to be delayed in her development. And then as we began working together, we recognized that there was another diagnosis that needed to be made. And so we helped that family get the appropriate diagnosis, and the appropriate diagnosis was that she was on the autism spectrum. So we worked with her in the play group. And so when you see children on the autism spectrum at this age, what you see is children who are happy to be on their own, not generally problematic because they just as soon stay on the perimeter. They don't necessarily want to eat things a great variety of things. They usually have a very narrow set of things that they're willing to eat, and we call it the blonde diet, their beige diet, and they have a difficult time moving from one thing to another. So right now we're going to wash our hands and come to the table to have a snack, so that transition can be really problematic. So playgroup is just an ideal place to work on all those things. And what we can do at playgroup is, because we have the intensive kind of staffing that's necessary, is we can make sure that that child isn't spending their time on their periphery, and that we're using some specific strategies that are going to help the child understand what their role is in that. So for instance, coming to playgroup can be really difficult. Separating from mom can be really difficult at playgroup. So we want to help prepare that child. And one way that we can do that is by creating a little story. And it's a storybook that says, we're going to get in the car, we're going to drive to Rise, here's what Rise looks like, we're going to walk in the door, we're going to say hi to our teacher, and then we're going to wave bye to mom. So that simple thing that we can do makes a huge difference. So for a child that isn't taking in language and using language in the way that we expect children to, having that visual strategy really helps prepare them to get there. So that's just one of the things that we can do to really help a child. So this child that I'm thinking about now had a very difficult time with drop-off. And it was a grandparent that brought her in, and the grandparent was really on board, came in with a big smile, and we were able to work through that whole process of having a successful drop-off, so that she could be there and be part of the play group. For her, moving from one activity to another was a very difficult thing, and could often end up with meltdowns. Joining in with other children instead of playing on the periphery was difficult for her. So if you have someone who can guide and who can arrange those kinds of activities so that she has success success with that. Those are the kinds of things that we do in playgroup. But when you come in and look like it, it looks like everybody's playing and everybody's happy. And that's the beauty of playgroup.
Well, and there's been a lot of studies done about how critical having fun is and being able to play together to your social, emotional development. And I think about the story that you're just sharing, and what's that mean to this young woman's lifelong success?
Yes. It's really interesting when you think about, as an adult, what are the things that make for a successful working life. It's the ability to work with other people is really critical. I mean, isn't that what everyone wants in a workplace? And those those skills begin to build in the birth to 3 years. So, I mentioned a child who's on the autism spectrum, and that's a child who has some real and significant needs on that end. But for every child, that need to have successful early childhood experiences that build their ability to get along with other people, to communicate their feelings, to understand what other people are saying, to read people's social gestures and social exchanges, and to be successful in that milieu is really important.
And really having a program such as yours provides an opportunity to early on identify where there may be some challenges and to begin to be able to address those.
Right.
So that you can reduce the impact of that over the lifetime.
Right. I've been in this field long enough that, those of us in early childhood and those of, parents everywhere have always known how important the early years are. Mm-hmm. But now we have very definitive scientific studies that show that the brain is still developing in the first 3 years, and that what we do has a real impact on the development of the brain. Conversely, if children are exposed to adverse experiences in the first 3 years, that impacts their brain development and their lifetime as well. So we do actually see children as well who may have experienced disruptions in their attachment, violence in the home, and those are things that we can help mediate and help that child move forward. But whatever those issues are, the first 3 years is really the place to begin to work on them. And the studies that the scientists have showed us what happens with brain development. The economists have showed us what that means to us in the long term. Mm-hmm. And the number that they're using is every dollar spent on early childhood, good early childhood programs saves at least $8 in the long run of things that have to be ameliorated, people who get in trouble with the law. I mean, most of the time, those are people that have difficult time with social emotional issues. So it's a really good investment.
It really is, and there's a lot of information now coming out, and we have some efforts really developing here in the Monadnock region to focus in on those early childhood and building a strong foundation there. And organizations like yours are just so necessary to building that foundation. We have some pictures with us that we're going to pull up so we can see some of those beautiful smiling faces of these children. And while Dave's pulling those up for us, you mentioned that the brain development that's going on, and I'm not sure people realize that from 0 to 3, it's at such a high rate of development, and that any kind of toxic stress that gets put in there, trauma and things, has tremendous impact. And we have to have these opportunities, like you're talking about, play groups, settings where children are really getting strong social, emotional, and that content development that you're talking about, because those are critical as well to lifelong success. But you really have to have all 3 things going on. And we're still, as a society, fairly dependent on home-based care for financial reasons. So as Dave's pulling up these pictures, let's also talk about how people can access your services while we're viewing those. Look at this beautiful little face here.
She is a charming little girl. She's now turned 3 and gone on to the school system, is doing very well. We worked closely with her family for really, she came to us when she was a young infant, and we came through a lot of challenges that she was facing with her family, and they have been incredible at understanding and adapting to her needs and celebrating who she is. And I think one of the things that parents get from coming to Rise is really a greater understanding of who their child is and what they can do to help and how they can advocate on behalf of their children. This is actually physical therapy. So when you think about physical therapy, you might think about going up to the medical center and having an adult tell you to move this part of your body or that part of your body. And as you can imagine, that doesn't work with little children. So what we do is through play. So Becky, who's one of our wonderful physical therapists, is doing what she's doing with very specific motives on the kinds of activity or muscles that she's trying to strengthen and help that child use. This is, we do a lot of gardening at Rise. Gardening is good for kids, it's good for the soul, and this is
good for health.
It's good for health, and we're part of the Community Gardens Initiative, and in addition to the garden that you're looking at, we have a garden out front that we can eat from, and the toddlers are a big part of that. They are great waterers.
So that's great, because at an early age they're learning some of that good nutritional values.
And trying foods that they might not otherwise have tried.
Right.
This is a home visitor going out to visit. This is Emily going out to visit a family, and a visit generally involves a bag of toys. And as I said before, our work is with families. You can see a little sibling there behind the mom. And so that home visitor will be going out there, talking with the mom about the things that she's doing that the mom can also do when she's not there. And she'll also be including that older sibling, because the last thing we want to do is have that child feel left out and have there be resentment and create more difficulty in the family. This is one of our wonderful little boys with Down syndrome who has done so well. When you talk about social emotional development, this little guy is just a shining star in what he was able to accomplish. He came to Rise and also was in our child care program, and had just did so wonderful. He also just turned 3.
You can't help but love little.
You can't help but love any one of these children. This is a little child who has a difficulty with one of her arms, and this is the occupational therapist who's doing Itsy Bitsy Spider. Now, how many of us as parents have done Itsy Bitsy Spider, or teachers have done Itsy Bitsy Spider? But this Itsy Bitsy Spider is intended to help that child use the arm that she's not comfortable using. You know, as you can imagine, if you have one arm that works well and you're a 2-year-old, you want to use that arm. So she's tricking her into using both of her arms through play.
Great. Super stuff. You know, we talked about that for lots of these kids. It's also about social acceptance and building peer relationships. And we probably think that occurs later in life when kids get into elementary school, you know, high school, that's the critical time. It's not. It's when they're young like this, because they learn how to establish those relationships with each other. And that carries right over into how they'll communicate, how they'll interact, how they'll accept how other people are working with them. It becomes so important. And when I think about things like bullying and threatening, that if you can build confidence early on in kids' lives, it has an impact all the way through their lives.
So we call that inclusion, you know, and that's really, when you think about developmental disabilities in the early years, the message to parents was they belong in this separate program. Maybe even they belong in the state institution. And if people are down the hall from you in elementary school and you never have any opportunity to interact with them, you never know them. If they're stuck up in Laconia in the state school as they were in the old days, out of sight, out of mind. And so what we know is so important is that that we begin from the very beginning by having children be part of our community, remain in families, be accepted for who they are. And playgroup is a wonderful place that we do that. So our child care families, they all embrace the idea that we're an inclusive center. And so many of our children in childcare are typically developing. And interestingly, I can reflect on my own children when they were at Rise Childcare. You just accept kids for who they are at that young age. There aren't any preconceived notions, and I often found that my children, they graduated at age 3, they met up with some of those children at elementary school then and gravitated towards them. And I think that's true, that we're developing good citizens that believe that, we're all okay just the way we are. And I think that also happens in the child care programs where our children are included and our staff are going out there and helping them be successful and helping them build friendships in that environment as well.
I can't agree with you more. My daughter was raised in the Winston Prouty environment over in Brattleboro, and she was a normally developing child, but interacting with and being part of an inclusive group like that, she's now 19 years old, going on 20. Her empathy level by the time she was 2 was absolutely amazing, and that has carried into her citizenship, as you mentioned, all of her life. She volunteers because of it. She's connected with lots of different people and always welcoming and embracing. It doesn't matter who you are. And it's really made her a better person, quite honestly. And so I think those inclusive environments are just critical to the development of all of our children.
Absolutely, to all of us.
And I know that you do a lot of great work connecting with the schools and really helping these kids transition to that next environment. And we have a few minutes to talk about that. Tell us a little bit how you help. So, for example, you mentioned the young woman that was the young child here. I think it was the first slide.
The little girl, yeah.
And how did you help her transition?
So, children can only stay in Rise until their 3rd birthday, and there's nothing magical about that day and time except that it's funding related. So many of our children do graduate before age 3. They've met their goals, they're doing well, and so we can graduate them whenever that happens and help families know what's out there for resources. But for those children who do need ongoing services, we want to work with the school system. And we start working with the school system shortly after a child turns 2. And so what we want to do is really make sure that by the child's 3rd birthday, the next placement will be ready, that they will know where they're going to be, that their goals are in place, the strategies that are going to be worked on will be in place, where they're going to be served is in place, how they're going to get there in terms of transportation, and all of those things are happening. Transitions are stressful. They're always stressful, life training, we all know that. But this is a transition that's a big transition. So it's moving from a time when your home visitor is coming to the home, sitting on the living room floor, and you're part of everything with the child. And then you're going to the next phase where your child's going to be served by the school system, and they have preschools, special ed preschools in place that include children who are typically developing, but it's a big, big change. And suddenly you're asked to put your child on a school bus and come in for parent conferences a couple times a semester, so it's very different. So we want to make sure that we go with families to meet the people in their school system, that we want them to be informed about what their rights are and what services are out there, and a range of options, not just one option. And we go with them to meetings. Meetings can be intimidating. When you go to those meetings, there'll be 8 or 9 people from the school system, so it's really important that parents feel informed and feel like they have someone they know that can help them with the process. So we actually have very successful transitions where our children are placed right at the right moment. And we have also really good working relationships with the school system. So I'm thinking about a little child that is transitioning this summer, and she's going to miss summer program because of her birthday, and she is a child on the autism spectrum, so the transition is going to be difficult for her. So we actually are contracting with the school system to provide some services after 3, to have the person that she knows go with her to school in the first couple weeks, so that we can feel confident that, this child can feel confident. I mean, this is a child that wants to leave the room, so she's really, there are a lot of safety issues. So that extra step that the school system and we have been able to put together is really so helpful for parents to feel comfortable with it and to assure that she's going to have a successful beginning in the school system.
So you're really living the motto right there of advocacy, and
Absolutely, yeah.
you know, you're providing advocacy for these families. I know we're coming to a close here, so one thing I do want to say is that work around disabilities and support for that at the state level is really in a tough place, that there's a lot of potential cuts coming here, and cuts that we are already faced with. And that has made this work even more challenging, and really it speaks to audience the need for you to really think about how you give, how you volunteer, and how you advocate for programs such as Rise, because they won't be here without you. And, you know, Tony mentioned that it's United Way. We all have to remember that United Way is all of you. And it's about you giving, volunteering, and advocating. Any last words, Tony?
Yeah, well, we are so grateful for what United Way does and the community does to support the work at Rise for Baby and Family. But it also isn't just United Way, it's also our state budget. And you know, there are a lot of demands on the budget. You know, you can tick them off on your hand, but it's really important that we take care of our people, and our young people are a very good investment, and so your vote counts as well.
So I want to thank Tony for joining us, and again, what she talked about is that children are a great investment. They are our future, never forget that. I want to thank you for joining us and remind you to please remember to live united by giving, by volunteering, and by advocating.